Welcome to episode 2 on the Best for Baby podcast. Today I'm talking about something that's about baby head shape. You may have heard of baby flathead syndrome. You may have seen babies with little helmets on and wondered what it's all about. Or you may be in the position where you have a baby and you've noticed they've got a slight flattening on some part of their head, or their whole head is starting to change shape slightly. And that's what I'm going to explain to you. I'm going to make sure you understand everything, know all the myths, answer the frequently asked questions, and of course tell you what to do to improve it and whether it might be time for you to get a little bit of extra help. So the first most frequently asked question is, of course, why is it suddenly an issue? Why is it suddenly a really common thing that we see today? It didn't used to be the case. We didn't used to get baby flathead syndrome. And the reason is that babies are put into positions, not just at night, throughout the day, where there is pressure being applied to one area on the back of the head. And it makes sense that that would cause a flattening, because we know babies' heads are very soft, they're very malleable, they're also not fused. And this is most true of when babies are born. Often they can come out with a totally squashed head. And it's supposed to work that way because it makes the head get to the smallest size possible in order to squeeze out the birth canal. After birth, though, the idea is that within a few days, the head kind of reshapes and goes back to the shape it should be. However, if you are applying pressure from the way the baby is resting and they're not being given a chance to rest in a different position, it's not being given the chance to reshape itself, and so we see this flattening happening on the back of the heads. Now, why nowadays? Well, firstly, I'm going to say sleeping on the back is very important. It is the right way to let your baby sleep because it's the safest way. So yes, babies to sleep on their backs, but unfortunately, that means that for 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17 hours of the day, they are having pressure applied to one area. Now, a lot of babies will lie flat on their backs and look up at the ceiling above them, and so the back of the head is completely flattened because it's so many hours where pressure is being put there. Other babies have something really common called a head turning preference, and so they look in one direction more than the other, and so that pressure is being applied to one area at the back of the head, and so it's causing that flattening on that one area. Also, our equipment nowadays is kind of geared to put pressure on the back of the head, and so we have car seats, we have push chairs, we have bouncy chairs, we have baby gyms, we have all sorts of things that promote the baby being on their back in some variation with pressure being applied to that same area. And on top of that, our babies' mattresses now are so much firmer than what they used to be. And this is for safety, and it's important because when babies do roll over, if they have very soft mattresses, they would sink into it and it could obstruct their airway. And so the mattresses are now really firm, making it safer for babies, but obviously creating an increase in the amount of pressure. So we have babies in one position for a huge percentage of the day on firmer equipment. And so it's no wonder that we see more of this than what we used to. The second question I get asked all the time is this going to fix itself? Is my baby's head going to correct itself? And the answer is yes and no. And that depends firstly on, is your baby a very active baby? Is your baby the kind of baby who is always going to develop on the quicker side of things? So as I'm sure all parents know, there's a huge range of what we consider normal, when we now say typical, development. So some babies might roll the first time ever at 2 months, and other babies, the first time they ever roll will be at 9 months. And so if your baby's on the quicker end of that movement spectrum, they're going to be redirecting that pressure from a very early age and removing pressure from their flattened area very quickly. And because it's such an early age where they're starting to redirect the pressure, there's still so much growth. The skull is still really soft. So the likelihood is they're going to fix their head shapes all by themselves through their own movement without anyone actually having to do anything. The contrast is obviously if your baby was always going to be slightly on the slower end of physical development, meaning that they were going to roll a little bit later, which is totally normal, totally fine. The difficulty is then they are probably lying flat on their back for a lot more hours than the babies who develop earlier. And once they start to come off their backs themselves, they're that much older. And so their head is that much harder, more difficult to reshape, and it's closer to being fused, shall we say. So the head fuses between 12 and 18 months, but the actual head itself is going to be a lot less malleable anytime from 4, 5, 6 months. The newborn skull is the really soft skull that you can still change a lot easier. So it's the baby's age that we're looking at and their activity levels that will determine whether they can fix it themselves. The other thing is, of course, your habits, what you're doing with your baby. So if you're giving your baby plenty of opportunity to put pressure onto the head in other places other than just their flat spot, you're likely to get a lot of improvement a lot quicker. And finally, we look at the type of head shape a baby has. If it's a really progressed flattening of the head, some people would say severe, I just need to call it a progressed head shape disturbance, then it's going to be far more tricky to correct, and you may need a little bit of additional help. It also is determined by what kind of head shape your baby has. Now, when we're looking at baby flathead syndrome, there are 2 types of head shapes we look at. The first is called a brachycephaly or brachycephaly, which is just where the flattening is across the back of the head. So as I spoke about earlier, when the baby lies flat on their backs and looks at the ceiling, the pressure is across the full back of the head. And so we get sort of a very even flattening across the back of the head. That's slightly easier to work with and to correct than your baby who has been looking in one direction all the time and therefore put pressure on one part of the skull only at the back. And that's something called a plagiocephaly. Now, plagiocephaly is a bit trickier because you've got a flattened area. So every time you put your baby down to sleep or to rest on their back, there's a bit of a corner where the flat spot is, and that makes the babies sort of drop in that direction. Also, there's a reason why they have that head turning preference. Very often it's their position in their womb has caused some muscle imbalance. One muscle's a bit tighter than the other in the neck. So there's lots of reasons, and that's why I like to say if your baby has got a plagiocephaly caused by them looking in one direction more than the other, it's usually a good idea to see your health visitor and your pediatrician just to rule out any reasons that is driving the head turning preference. And then you can get some specific tailor-made advice for your baby's head turning preference, as well as the generic advice I'm going to give you today. But that does mean that they are driven to look in one direction. It's that much harder to correct. Now, none of these things are impossible. It's always possible to get a great correction in head shape, but it just means you have to be aware of it and you've got to work a little bit harder on it. With both those head shapes, again, I spoke about progressed or severer ones, and just so you know, for you to be able to classify your baby's head shape, if your baby has the evenly flattened head shape, the brachycephaly, when it's really severe, the back will be quite flat, and because that pressure has to go somewhere, it causes bulging to the sides of the head. And what we see, if you look at the baby's head from on top, it's almost a semicircle with the flattening at the back. With the plagiocephaly, the flattening is on one side at the back of the head, and that might be all your baby has, and then it's probably quite mild. However, that pressure can come forwards and cause bulging to the same side but at the front of the head, so on the face, and we see quite a prominence in the one side of the face where it's shifted forward, and you can see that the ears become asymmetrical. One ear moves forward or it goes upwards or downwards. So if you're starting to see these kind of asymmetries in the face as well as the back of the head, that's when it's important to get some help. So why do doctors and healthcare professionals tell people that this is going to fix itself? Well, the answer is sometimes it does. Certainly in the past, before our babies spent so much time on their backs, before they had all of this equipment that was so firm and rigid and encouraging them to spend time on their backs, these things would completely rectify and fix themselves. Even the babies with the head turning preferences, because they would spend so much time on their tummies that sometimes they would look in one direction on their tummies, and then next time they did tummy time, they would look in the other direction, and that would stretch out the neck muscles. It would help them to get nice and strong in the weaker neck muscles. And so we'd find all of these issues would be resolved in the past. And so, yes, a lot of healthcare professionals will tell you that this will completely fix itself. And also, some still do. Your active babies, your babies with the milder head shapes, they are far more likely for these things to correct themselves. Now, while we're talking about head shapes and the fact that they can spontaneously correct, I do want to mention something. It's a condition that won't correct itself, and it's different. It's not caused by having your baby in one position all the time. So the head is made up of separate bones in little babies, and the areas between the bones are called the sutures. And in some babies, in very few babies, it's an incredibly rare condition, but one of those sutures fuses early. And what that causes is that where it's been fused, you cannot have any more growth happening. So that side of the head becomes small, whereas the rest of the head is growing. So the head shape is affected because you have uneven growth as a result of an inability to grow in one area because it's closed too early. Now, it's not something you can look at your baby and go, oh, my baby definitely doesn't have, or my baby definitely has. But there are key signs that I can share with you that you will know, oh, I think I should probably go and have this checked out. And the reason we want it checked out is because you can get a bit of a buildup of pressure inside the head if this is the case, and also because there are very successful surgeries that can correct this. So what you're going to look for, first of all, is now that you've listened to this and you're getting help, what you should see, if you are really proactive in doing what I'm going to tell you to do, you should definitely not see any progression. Your baby's head shape should not get worse. I'm hoping it's going to get better, but it should definitely not get worse. And if your baby's head shape continues to get worse, then it's either you need some help and it's not this condition, it's just that you need a bit of help. And it's a trickier one, so it's good to go and get help anyway. But it could be that it is this very condition. The condition is called craniosynostosis, if you want to know. The other thing to notice is if your baby is just uncomfortable, they are very fractious, they're not settling easily, if there's a change in them, if they are developmental concerns, anything like that, along with an altered head shape. And when I say altered, I mean different from what we've seen in the past, which is the classic oval shaped head. If it's tied with any of these things, then I think it's probably a good idea to go and have someone assess your baby. And then finally, with craniosynostosis, it doesn't usually fall into the head shapes that I've described. So it's usually not the classic brachycephaly or plagiocephaly. What we usually see is a slightly different head shape. There's variations. Sometimes it's a long, thin head shape this way. And for lack of a better description, almost like a rugby ball head shape. Or you might find that one side of the head is much smaller than the other side. So with your plagiocephaly, you'll have the flattened area, but on the same side, the face will have protruded forward. So the size of that half of the head isn't smaller, whereas with this condition, it's going to cause a smaller one side of the head than the other. So if you feel like perhaps any of those things apply to your baby, definitely go and have a medical professional assess your baby. But most of all, if you consider your baby's head shape to be quite severe, I definitely think you should get a little bit more help. And I will point you in the direction of that at the end of this episode. So, what can we do to prevent our baby's head shapes getting worse and to help it to get better? Well, the answer is simple, but I'll take you through how to make it easy. The simple answer is remove pressure from the flattened area. Easy as that. If your baby has a flattening across the whole of the back of the head, get them off the whole of the back of the head. If it's on one side, get them off that side. And what that does is it allows growth to take place in that area because there's no pressure there squashing it and preventing growth from taking place. And it also gives the pressure to the other sides of the head that haven't been having that pressure to contain growth. So we look at this in two parts: when you are asleep and when you are awake, because we're going to work differently. When you are asleep, your baby has to sleep on their back. It's the safest thing. So we put them to sleep on their backs, and we don't worry if the baby is now putting pressure on that area. Deep sleep overnight is the most important thing. So we're not going to interfere with it. We leave that baby in a safe position because we're not awake to supervise them, and we don't fiddle with them throughout the night. We just leave them to sleep. If you feel very strongly that you can turn your baby's head when they are asleep so that you redirect the pressure, that's fine. Do it, but do it once in the night. Don't keep doing it throughout the night because it becomes a stressful situation. And every time you turn the baby's head, you may not wake them, but you may take them out of their nice deep sleep into a light sleep phase, and you've interrupted their sleep cycles. And they need full deep sleep as well as their light sleep. So just do it once. And I usually say to parents, when you go to sleep, after your baby's been asleep for a while, when you go to sleep, go and have a look. Is my baby in a deep sleep state? So are they like lying there, they're breathing deeply, they're not moving? Then yes, they're in a deep sleep. Take the head from behind, slide your hands underneath the back of the head. Don't grab the front, the face. Put your hands at the back and turn the head gently into the position that will remove pressure from the flattened area. And then leave your baby. If they turn their head back immediately, leave them. If they turn their head back after half an hour, fantastic. You've had a great win. But don't go and do it again over and over. Rather let them sleep. So at nighttime, that's all we do. There are a number of pillows and cushions on the market that you might be tempted to buy. And please do your research if that's the case. A lot of them are for babies who have got a brachycephaly, so the flattening across the back of the head, because they form sort of little nests with the bottom hollowed out, so that pressure is removed from the back of the head. Now, the problem with this is if your baby has quite an advanced brachycephaly, you might find that little cushion is still putting pressure on the flattened areas. And certainly, if your baby always looks in one direction, that cushion, they will end up turning their head and having that cushion pressing into the flattened area. So it's not helpful for a lot of conditions. For the same reason, don't put a rolled up towel or something of your own device behind your baby's head in the hopes of keeping the baby's head turned that way, because it's not going to keep the baby's head turned that way. They will return their head to their preferred position at some stage, and what you'll find is now you have an elevated surface because you've put a roll behind there, and they're going to be leaning on it, so it's going to be even more pressure on the flattened side. The other problem with these devices is that if your baby does roll, as we all know, our babies will do this when we're not expecting them to, and if they roll over onto their front or their side and you've got a cushion or a pillow in the bed with them, it is not safe. It could block their airway. So I'm not a fan of using any of these pillows and cushions. There are some that are simply they look like big, tiny baby pillows, like a normal pillow, and their role is to just soften the surface that the baby is resting on. And the idea there is that it's helpful because it's not as much pressure on the back of the baby's head. However, these need to be guaranteed that they are breathable and safe for a baby to sleep on, because remember, at nighttime you are not supervising your baby. So that's it for nighttime. There's very little you're going to do at the night or when you yourself are asleep. So now we look at when you are awake and you are supervising your baby. Well, first of all, we're going to look at the baby's awake time. So playing with your baby. You're going to obviously, it makes sense, play with your baby on their sides, on their tummies, holding them, carrying them in slings, or if they're lying on their back with their head turned to the side. And if they have flattening across the whole of the back of the head, we want to make sure they spend time looking to both sides when they're lying on their backs. And this is tricky. Any of these positions will be new to your baby. If they have developed this kind of head shape, it's because they've been in the same position for a long time. So this is tricky. And you just have to do short bursts over time and build it up slowly, slowly, slowly. And it's important that it's done consistently and in a way that is motivating to the baby. So if you are close to your baby initially, it will be motivating for them to stay there. So if you put them on their tummy, lie down, be face to face with them, put your hand on their back, sing, hush, be calming, show them a mirror, show them a contrast toy, show them something in their field of vision that they don't have to work hard to see, and let them be motivated by it. Let them enjoy the time spent in these positions. Now, initially, you're going to say, oh, I can't just lie on the floor with my baby all the time. But it is just initially. It's getting them used to it. As soon as they complain, roll them back, comfort them, or roll them onto their side, or roll them onto their back, looking to the side, comfort them, spend time in that position, then roll them back onto their tummy or put them back onto their tummy. And so you're spending cumulatively in all sorts of different positions quite a lot of time off the back or off the pressure area on the back of the head, and you're getting them used to it and comfortable. And over time, you will be able to leave your baby lying on their side playing or lying on their tummy playing. The previous podcast episode I did was about tummy time. It'll give you some more hints on how to do tummy time if it's difficult for your baby, if they don't enjoy it. So please do have a listen to that. Carrying your baby is wonderful. Obviously, it's wonderful for everyone. You can't spoil your baby by carrying them too much. And certainly if you've got the time to go and sit down and have your baby resting on their tummy on your chest, interacting, your baby's going to love it. You're going to love it. Your baby can nap there on your chest as long as you don't have an armrest in their breathing area or anything loose or clothing or hair covering their nose and mouth. And of course, you need to make sure that you stay awake so you can monitor that they're breathing well and that they're safe. Carrying them in a sling is lovely because it's taking them off being flat on their back. So the pressure too, even if the fabric of the sling goes on the pressure area, it's significantly less than if you are leaving your baby to lie flat on their backs. So you're going to practice and play and do all these different things. And as I said in the previous podcast, if you are pregnant and having a baby, or your baby is very young, you can do these tummy time and side lying during the day from day one, from when they are tiny. Get them used to it, get them enjoying it. And also in the awake time, so we've said awake time, they're going to be on their sides, tummy, lying on their backs, looking to either side, being carried. Now, I just want to talk about equipment, because the first thing that we make use of a lot are the baby gyms, where the baby lies flat on their backs and they have toys dangling down from the front. So if you want to make use of this, I would take off the toys that dangle from on top and put something on the ground to the side, like a mirror, or yourself. Go and lie there on the side. So your baby spends time lying in the baby gym, looking to the side where they don't normally look and they don't normally have pressure. Over time, you can then dangle longer toys to the side so that the baby is spending time on their back, but with no pressure on the flattened area. The second piece of equipment is bouncy chairs. Now, bouncy chairs are lovely because babies enjoy them. You put them in and you bounce the baby. Some of them vibrate and the baby's really comfortable and they're quiet and they're happy and you've got your hands free and you can do a whole lot. The downside is that there's quite a firm pressure at the back of the head. And on top of that, because they vibrate and bounce and the baby's enjoying themselves, the baby doesn't seek stimulation, which means the baby's going to lie really still, usually in their favored position. So if it's looking in one direction or just flat forwards. Whereas if a baby isn't overly stimulated, they're going to seek stimulation by turning their head from side to side and wriggling and trying to move, and thereby redirecting the pressure on their head. So putting them in the bouncy chair is going to make them probably direct the pressure towards the flattened area and spend quite a lot of time there. So if you do use a bouncy chair, please limit it. When I say limited, ideally 10-15 minutes a day, no more than that, because it's something that we rely on. We come to rely on because they are great in keeping our babies happy and entertained and us being hands-free. I don't want to take away your equipment, so use it for short periods and instead try and build up your baby's time at being comfortable lying on the ground in positions that don't put pressure on the flattened area that I've just described. The last piece of equipment that we can talk about are the little baby seats that you get that look a bit like a booster seat, where the baby sits, they're wedged into them, their hips are really bent nicely, and there's no pressure behind the head. So they've got to hold their head up, and the backrest sort of extends to just below the level of the shoulder. So this is fine from a head shape perspective because there's no pressure on the back of the head. They're also quite nice because they're working a little bit on head control and the hips are nicely bent. So for me, that's a better position than the bouncer, but your baby has to be much older to be in it. The downside is, again, that we're using equipment to make a baby do something they're not ready to do. If your baby was ready to sit, you wouldn't be putting them in this chair. And whenever we put babies for extended periods of time in positions they're not ready for, it can lead to other difficulties, and they might feel uncomfortable because they're trying so hard to balance there, or there's other things that can arise. So it's better to limit those kind of pieces of equipment, but from a head shape perspective, they're slightly better than the other bouncy chair. So again, if you're going to use this, 10-15 minutes maximum throughout the day. The other issue with pieces of equipment like this is we call them containers because they contain movement. They prevent movement, independent exploration and movement of a baby. So the best is for a baby to be actively free on the ground, even if they are lying on their back. Try and get them lying on their back looking in a different direction. But from a developmental perspective, it's better for them to be lying on their backs with some pressure on the flattened area because they're going to be able to move. And then the more they are allowed to move, the quicker they develop, the sooner they will roll over, the sooner they will start to sit and therefore spontaneously achieve positions that take away the pressure on the back of the head. So limit equipment where possible is the take home from that. I also just want to say, never interfere with your baby's feeding. So much like sleep, we don't want to interfere with their overnight sleep. We don't want to interfere with their feeding. So particularly if you're nursing, when you hold your baby, don't go, oh my goodness, the pressure is now on the flattened area. Don't worry about it. Don't interfere with feeding. Just feed your baby. Know that when you're holding your baby, even if you're holding them so that you're supporting them on the flattened area, it's going to be far less pressure than when they are lying on a flat, firm surface. And secondly, don't make them work hard for their feed because you will build up a negative connotation in feeding. And you want feeding to be as smooth as possible. And that is far more important than a head shape issue. So don't interfere with feeding. We don't try and make them turn and use the bottle to turn their heads. Feeding is separate. Keep feeding completely separate to all of this. And then the last thing I want to talk about, because everyone has these questions, is helmets. Now, helmets are quite controversial. There's not a huge amount of evidence for how they help. the theory is very sound, because what they do is the helmet is tailor-made to your baby. So what it does is it creates a situation where there is no pressure on the flattened area and a bit of pressure on the areas that bulge. And so it restricts growth in those bulging areas, and it allows growth to take place in the flattened area. So in theory, you're going to get the best outcomes possible if your child wears a helmet. This is, of course, if your child is wearing that helmet as they should be. So that means they say 23 hours a day, but actually it's 24 hours a day, except for when you bath your baby and you take it off, you wash your baby's head, you wipe down the inside of the helmet, and as soon as baby's head and helmet are dry, you put it back on. So that means that your baby is sleeping with no pressure on the flattened area. Your baby is playing, however, you don't have to think about it all day long, how to relieve the pressure. So it's incredibly helpful. It takes off a lot of the onus on the parent to have to work really hard. And certainly for head shapes that are quite severe, it's probably your greatest opportunity to really get a good correction. However, it's obviously a huge cost, a huge investment for parents to make, and it is at the end of the day a purely cosmetic issue. Not only a financial investment, it's an investment for parents to make sure your baby is wearing it all the time, at all occasions, whenever you take your babies out. It honestly doesn't tend to bother the babies at all, from what I've seen. It can be something for families to have to get used to more than anything else. And again, at the end of the day, it's something you have to weigh up because it's going to be privately funded. It's got to be done at the right time for the baby. So if your baby's already at a stage where their head is not going to change that much, you might find it's not a lot of correction that you can get anyway. And so each baby is individual, and each baby needs to be assessed as to whether it is going to be effective for them, and whether it is appropriate, and whether their head shape is significant enough to require it. So if you are quite concerned about your baby's head shape and you think, oh, maybe this is what we need, then it's always worth having an assessment. And you would have an assessment with an orthotist, particularly someone who is experienced in cranial orthotics. And what they should do is a free assessment. Here in London, where I am, there's many companies who do it for free, the assessment. And they have a look at your baby, and they might say to you, they measure it objectively, and they can calculate whether it's mild, moderate, or severe. And they might say to you, you really don't need this. It's very mild, your baby's head shape. Or they may say, yes, it's a good idea to do this. And what a number of the companies would do is say, go away and do these exercises for a month. And they may give you exercises. They may tell you to see a physiotherapist for a month. You might do exactly what I've been telling you to do for a month on my website, which I'll tell you about in a moment. There's a lot more resources that will help you more specifically. But they might tell you to go away for a month. And if you see some progress, they might say, oh, you probably don't need the helmet. Or they might say, okay, now we haven't seen enough progress. We'd like to proceed with the helmet. So it's very much in your control, but it's always worth, if you can, having an assessment with an orthotics company who can give you a completely objective rationale as to whether or not your baby will need the helmet. So I hope that puts your mind at rest. I hope, if you have been really concerned, if you think your baby's head shape is quite significant, I hope that you will reach out and find someone in your area who can help you, or see your GP or your pediatrician or your health visitor, as they will certainly be able to point you in the right direction. Please also do have a look at my website. It's physiobaby.co.uk, and on there I have got a freebie download, a PDF, which is called the Baby Flathead Fix booklet. And it's a lot of what I spoke about today, but particularly strategies and photographs and pictures of how to help your baby rest and play in all the other positions that I have described. So that's kind of a bit more step by step and a helpful resource for you. And then I've also got, if you really are concerned, you feel like you need a little bit more help, I've got a course for parents that you can do, an online course that you can access through the website. And of course, you can also just reach out to me through the website and let me know if you need a one-to-one remote consultation or some advice. Just feel free to know if you need a one-to-one remote consultation or some advice. Just feel free to get in to contact me there. So I wish you all the very, very best, but most of all the best for your baby.